So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure we'll have more people and participants joining us, but let's get going. My name is Malcolm. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at IDfy. I think the purpose of we carefully crafted the purpose of today's conversation. We of course encounter this question a lot of times to say, is there real value to privacy transformations beyond, let's say, ticking the box of compliance? And that's what we want to explore. I think as IDfy, of course, we've got a ringside view to this, given we're in the midst of several implementations of our platform Privy. So we are converts. I think the panel we've assembled here today are converts, and we're hoping each of you can walk out of this webinar being converts as well. That there is real, tangible business value from privacy and trust transformations. Right. That's the intention of this conversation. So I think I'll quickly ask the panel to introduce themselves, but broadly we'll explore a few themes. One, what exactly is the value, right? And I'm going to hope to put the panel members on the spot to kind of really push to say what is the value from privacy transformations. We'll explore a little bit of what the journey looks like, as well as then how do you sort of galvanize an organization to get going, right? I'm sure there are questions on ROI. Where do we find the resources, the team, taking the rest of org along? So those are the few themes we're going to explore today. And like I said, the aim is most of you walk away with having truly believed that there is value to privacy transformation, then ticking the box, right? So with that, I will then request the panel to introduce themselves. We've assembled, you know, leaders from different sort of who can bring in different perspectives. So I will start in no particular order. So maybe Krishna, you want to go first, followed by Ashutosh, Anshu, and then Ashish, perhaps.
Sure. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you so much for setting the context. And I would like to say that if we had started alphabetically, I would probably be the last to start first. But of course, I would start with a quick introduction on what I do and my role and basically what I think about the concepts that we have in place as well. So my name is Krishna. I am responsible for leading the consulting practice at Dutient.ai, and we are a AI augmented solutions provider in the data management and governance space. And I think privacy and cybersecurity and other data management topics are so closely related and interdependent on each other that we can draw really a lot of good parallels from other data governance as well as cybersecurity practices when we look at privacy as a domain or as a vertical within the overall data landscape. And I think those are particularly the areas that I would also want to discuss in the next few minutes on how businesses can also leverage more opportunity out of privacy. Because I think a lot of people also say that in India, we don't really have a law that is enforced, considering the lack of a regulator, considering the lack of industry also taking in measures to implement privacy practices. But it's not a new concept. It's not a foreign concept. We have been hearing privacy over the last few years, especially arising out of the requirements from EU and US. And because of the cultural differences in India, of course, the implementation will also not be the same, which is what we also intend to uncover over the next few minutes in this webinar. So with that, I would just pass it over to you, Malcolm, and probably would want you to take over the
Yeah.
next.
No, I think it'll be great to hear a very quick introduction from, like I said, Ashutosh, Anshu, and then maybe Ashish, if you don't mind, please, for the audience.
Yeah. Hi everyone. This is Ashutosh. I look after the strategy and the product ops part at Urbanic. And I've been in, I would say, like from the last 2.5 years, I've been involved in conversation with Krishna and one of our providers who helped us to get into the, like, say, structure what we needed for the compliance perspective, plus building the more trust around the users, which included the privacy part. And it's not just one simple word, I would say, because we have enlightened ourselves in terms of building more trust with the consumer, with the kind of changes that we have done in the current the world, that how user perceive any brand in terms of getting their information passed on. So that's how, like, I've got introduced to this particular domain, and we implemented the same in the last 1.5 year. And now we can strongly say that we are privacy first in terms of providing that trust to the consumers to shop freely with confidence with Savannah and Urbanic.
Anshu, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anshu Singal, and I work as a data protection officer at IndiGo, which is IndiGo Airlines for all of us. And I've been in privacy space since 2018 now. I think the day GDPR got enforced, that is when the organization realized, oh, we have to implement it too. So that is when we started working towards it. At that point of time, I was in travel domain, but I was in a different organization. Um, there I was working more as a processor, less of a controller, and here Indigo is more of a controller. So different perspectives, being on the both sides of the table. Uh, and uh, uh, since I also have a background with security, worked in infosec, so I think I am able to kind of bring in that right mix of understanding to the regulation as well as to the implementation, which is business friendly also. So that's little about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashish?
Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Ashish and I'm working as a head of information security and DPO at Magicbricks. It's a B2C company, so a lot of public data we are processing at our platform. So, of course, privacy regulation is very crucial to a country like India. So, uh, everyone need a trust, right? What data they are sharing with any platform. So, of course, it is very interesting and hope for the best with DPTPA.
Super. Thank you. I think with that, why don't we get going? I think the first part we're going to explore is exactly what this webinar is title and what this is about, which is to say, what is the sort of business value of trust and privacy, right? Or privacy and data governance, whatever form you look at it. So I'll perhaps start with, and we'll request all the panelists to keep it short because we'll just do a quick round robin to say what is the value they see in a very sort of very tangible way. And perhaps I'll start with you, Ashutosh. You said you've been on this journey for a while, right? So what is tangible business value that you see, and I'll then maybe quickly go around and get everyone's thoughts as well.
So in terms of the business value, I would say we wanted to make our platform more trustworthy, because if you see in a very like e-commerce consumer way, still we have a split of cash on delivery payments. We have a lot of digital payments come online in India, but still we have a large chunk of consumer still paying on cash on delivery. So the trust is still not there with the platforms that are coming up who are selling online. People, they like any every individual try to find of an offline connection, so that if there's any trouble there, so they try to contact that brand or their platform offline. But with data protection, it's something becomes more agile, because when the consumer is sharing the data, they are becoming more aware about how the data is getting utilized with social media or different kind of domains where the data is getting used. Third party platforms are taking up that data, so they become more aware about that situation, and they want their data to be controlled in the right manner, because the kind of questions that come up from consumer, like how I want to delete my account, I would delete my orders history, I want to delete some sort of information, I don't want those marketing promotional emails, I don't want those kind of notifications coming up to me. So those strong choices are coming up from consumer at different levels, and now those choices have become like more often as compared to like when, if you talk about 20 before 2021 or before COVID, that time, like when before 2020, the e-commerce angle was not focusing on this part, and now since the choices of the consumer is coming up in different way, the questions are coming up, so DPDPA is something which helps them to protect their data in a right manner, and that's how the platforms are getting more aware about like what kind of infrastructure they need to put up, so that when these questions come up, they are able to facilitate those requests and make the platform or their brand more trustworthy for a consumer to shop in the right manner.
All right. Anshu, your quick take. What is the value? You see, I think your video is off, perhaps. So, yeah.
I have turned it on. So, so I think, initially, I would say for almost every organization in the beginning, privacy is always compliance, because there are fines, There is this regulation, everybody's scared of those big fines, so 4% of the turnover, 2% of the turnover, 250 crores. So I think in the beginning for everyone is just, getting that compliance done and done with. You have policies in place, you will do a assessment, put controls, that's about it. But it's the iterative process, I would say. So when you start going deeper, you realize that how the teams operate, especially when you understand the data flows, how the internally the data is flowing, or how it is being shared with other third parties. That is when you understand that how data is managed, how customers are communicated with, how partners are chosen. And when, as a privacy professional, you understand these operational challenges of data handling, that is when you are able to give meaningful inputs, in their day-to-day work. See, policies and all is okay, but actually translating those policies into day-to-day SOPs, that is where the business value is going to get driven. So when there is an intersection of your data protection regulation, your business operation, and sectoral practices. For example, in our case, we are a very, very heavy regulated industry. We'll have global laws, we will have DGCA laws, we have Ministry of Civil Aviation, you know sharing a lot of laws and circulars from time to time. So that is when, when you start giving those nuanced inputs, that is when I feel that, yes, you are able to bring in some value to the business. That's my take on it.
Right. Ashish? Ashish, you're on mute.
Yeah. So I'm going to continue Ansu statement. Of course, data in organization basically to identify the data, what data you are processing, either customer data or internal employee data, in terms of structured or unstructured data, right? So discovery of data and make a inventory and maintain the inventory of data is very critical. So there is a variety of information which is personal information which is processing in your organization. Of course, HR is processing their own, legal is they are processing. So deep as per the like privacy guideline, whatever your PII information you are processing, right? What volume you are processing, so it is your responsibility to make the secure it and make the trust, right? So it is very critical, and I think it is a kind of layer by layer approach, right? It will not mature in single day, you can say, or month or year. It is a long journey, right? Maybe 5 or 6 months you will achieve the maturity of 80 to 90%. This is my perspective.
Got it. Krishna, you want to sum it up? What is the business value?
Absolutely. So, because I come from a consulting background, so I've seen different types of approaches for privacy implementations across industries and geographies. And one thing that stands out is most privacy implementations or most compliance obligations, why they fail is because companies typically look at it from a perspective of meeting a requirement that stems out of the law, right? And it's not as easy to operationalize something that stems out of a regulatory requirement. Building a policy has become easier than ever. You have your Gen AI is doing that for you. But to operationalize that policy, that is where the real kicker takes place. Because if I look at consent, for example, right, which is basically the heart of the DPDPA. But if you go to a business team or a product team and then you say that I'm looking at chapter 2, section 4, and I want to talk about consent, it really would not help you to implement your privacy requirements within those teams, because you have to make sure that the language that you use to communicate privacy within your organization is different for different teams. If you speak to a product team, you have to talk to them in a language that they understand. If you speak to a marketing team or a HR team, you have to make sure that your language is not very legal verbiage focused and more focused on practical business processes that they have to deal with on a daily operations. Driving conversations in a way that reflects well with their daily business operations really helps you implement privacy requirements better.
Got it. Yeah, and audience, please keep questions coming. We will keep some time at the end towards it. No, so thank you for sharing these, and I picked up different themes. I think Anshu said it's a journey, and Ashutosh, you talked about trust. But I want to explore this notion of trust. It's a very so do you say, loosely used term, and I think hard to put your arms around it, right? So, so I would perhaps ask Anshu, you've been on the journey for a while, right? In some sense, even before um, DPDP, I think you mentioned that. So, could you explain to us, this notion of trust? You deal with a large customer base, multiple geographies. So, how do you gauge that trust has increased, for example, on the back of privacy? What do you really see when you say trust has improved or customers are trusting you more? Could you sort of demystify this for us a little bit?
Okay, so if I have to sum it up, even before I give a long answer, the short answer is, if you see less number of data subjects coming your way, I think definitely the trust has increased. If it has
Hmm.
gone down, yes, people have accepted, people understand. If you think that, whatever data subjects come your way, you're able to respond to them in the first go in a way that, there is no coming back of the customer with another response. It's not, going in circles. Then I would say, yes, you have achieved that.
Anshu, we lost you.
So I would just like to pick up on that piece as
Yeah,
well.
go ahead, please.
I
We'll
resonate
come
with
back.
what Anshu said, but it
Regulations
also
also understand it's the compliance, it's the regulation fines and everything, but ultimately it's the for anything wrong, it really impacts your brand and whatever goodwill you've earned over so many years. So end of the day, it is important for the organization, how customers perceive you. So that's the core. But interestingly, I will say, while customers interest is at the core, but what really and truly shapes the privacy mindset and culture within the organization, it isn't the customer always. You know, it is the entire ecosystem which is around us. So, for example, if we talk about travel, we work across multiple geographies, we work across different partners, different airlines, travel agents, online travel agents. Then there's so many global laws. So, when these requirements which come from different partners, from different uh, geographies, that is what really pushes the culture of accountability, because you're not only answerable to your customer, you're also answerable to your partner network. And then, as you move along, as the maturity kind of gains within the organization, we must also realize that privacy touches every function. So whether it is airport operations teams, whether it is in-flight services, whether it is digital teams who are working on a product, or customer experience who are servicing the customers, that is slowly and slowly, each one of them will start realizing that how privacy impacts their own operations. And that's, when that starts happening, that is what ultimately builds the trust with our customers. It's a slow process. I will not say that if you achieved compliance, you've also achieved the consumer trust. No, it takes time.
Got it. Krishna, you were saying something. Why don't you complete that?
absolutely. So what I was saying is that there are two reasons why you might receive low number of DSRs. One is that you have a mature program and the customers trust you. Second is that you don't have a channel available. So we notice a lot of organizations that typically have all the sort of processes they would want to build around privacy, but they forget the most fundamental of it, which is to create an or open a channel for individuals or customers or data principals to raise a request to them. Right now, a simple example that we noticed in one of our previous discussions, that there was a company that made an email available to people where people can reach out to them for DSRs or data principal request. But when we had that discussion with the company and understood the kind of email they are using, we realized that the email is not functional anymore. Right now, this particular organization conducted their data discovery scans, knew where their data lies, had a data inventory in place, did their PIAs on time, but the most fundamental aspect of it, an active email box where someone could respond to a DPR, was inactive. So I think what Anshu said is absolutely right, that it is a good indicator of looking at whether your privacy program has matured over time. But for smaller organizations or startups, it is also equally important to see why you're not receiving enough DSRs.
Got it. Got it. So let's maybe move on a little bit from there. And I wanted to understand this notion. I think the reason, obviously, there are different perspectives also is to hear different viewpoints, right? Anshu, you're probably much farther along and you have the benefit of looking backward a few years later, right? But I want to ask Ashish, as probably someone who's just embarking on this. You're just probably starting on this journey, probably in the midst of putting your thoughts in place, your team in place, etc. Right? How would you think about the sort of the value of privacy? Right? How do you explain it internally to your organization? Right? One is, of course, there is compliance, fine lagega, that story, right? But beyond that, how do you explain it for someone like you who's just beginning to start? You don't necessarily have a lot of examples around you, perhaps.
So, yeah, to see, my job is to simplify and translate in very layman language to organization. In terms of privacy, first time, yeah. So in terms of privacy, of course, I will say ki if we will maintain the privacy of users, of course, we will grow the business. So this is directly proportional to your business as well, right? Like being a customer, if I have a bad experience, so this is word of mouth service, right? This platform they are not responding, and we have the grievances, and today is the we have people are leveraging the social media to your Instagram or Twitter, so they are broadcasting the message. So customer satisfaction is very important. So putting this perspective in their mind, of course, we are facing a lot of grievances, a lot of customer complaints, which is related to some time. Of course, every customer have different viewpoint. So it is very critical. So that's why privacy by design and full-fledged implementation is very crucial to organization. Any organization which is B2C in nature.
Got it. Got it. Ashutosh, maybe turning over to you. Now you obviously work in a very different space than airlines and real estate listings and sort of the Magicbricks world. So in your world, of course, user experience, personalization is key. So how have you sort of built your privacy thought process, right? In terms of customer journeys, reducing friction, and so on and so forth, right? So that you are able to balance both, privacy, which we are saying as value, versus also at the same time managing user experience and catering to the simplicity from a customer journey standpoint.
Yeah. Malcolm, actually, it's not real estate. It's we do online e-commerce like shopping. It's
No,
a
no, I was
fashion
referring to Ashish.
platform.
So I'm saying I was trying to say that airlines and real
Okay,
estate
okay.
is
Sorry, sorry. Then
Ashish's
I
world, but
misunderstood the code. Okay,
no, no,
okay.
in your world, how do you do it? That's what I meant to say.
Yeah. So see, for us, for brands like Urbanic, for like brand like Urbanic as ours, when entire shopping journey is built around experience. So it's like
Correct.
hidden personalization and privacy posture has evolved in terms of from being compliance driven to being the experience driven. So we realize that Gen Z and millennials, for example, they see privacy as a brand of trust, not just fine print in terms of like say privacy is there, they manage the consent things and everything of that sort. They expect transparency, they expect instant control. So instead of treating privacy as a checkbox, we designed it directly into the UX layer, like where the user journey is happening. For example, like our consent prompts, the preference centers, and communication controls are all embedded within the shopping flow. It's not hidden in a setting page or something like that, which a lot of platform does. We don't have those kind of dark patterns for the user, so that you go on social media and post about it like they do it for other platforms. So you can manage all the preferences in terms of notification, data sharing preferences, personalization control. It is all there in the user's hands. And even we also reframed our privacy messaging very strongly, like moving away from like say legally legalize it to like plain conversation design, but we made it like more fitted towards the brand tone. We did not want to have it like in a very standard manner where the user doesn't want to get the information that is there. They really understand what is actually the changes that we are doing. So when we make the shift, actually we see that our engagement is something which becomes better. And we saw that changes came up and higher opt-in rates. People, there were lower dropouts or during after the checkouts and all those experience. Those changes we could also see, and we could see the changes coming up into the metrics. So I would say like with Gen Z especially, the privacy done right isn't the fiction. It's like more of like a part of the value proposition kind of a thing.
Interesting, very interesting. So Krishna, maybe I think Ashutosh talked a little bit about the journey and how they thought about it and making consent collection easier. Would be good, obviously, to get your thoughts on that. But I think the real question that I would like to ask is, of course, this is for like in his case or in any of the cases we're talking about here, this is the customers transacting, right? And sometimes you do it at the time of onboarding, you can do it in the shopping flow. But a lot of organizations are sitting on historic customer data, right? This could be customers who are not transacting or customers who maybe are sitting around in your, you know, data set. How do you think about consent for that? Because that's also a big, if we're all saying trust is important, that's also a big part of establishing trust with them. I might not be transacting with you today, or I might not be active necessarily. So how do you deal with a existing base of customers and think
Absolutely.
about consent there?
Sure. Thanks, Malcolm, for that question. I think there's someone also on the chat who probably asked the same question as to what do you do with consent for data that you've already collected.
Yeah.
And we also noticed a fantastic use case around this for an organization that was close to 50 years old. And they had data in inventories and workspaces or racks that they were not even aware of, because, of course,
Yeah.
documentation from 50 years old is not something you can expect most organizations to do. So that's also a great piece on how to approach these problems, because typically when you look at the act, there's a requirement for notifying individuals
Correct.
about certain processes that you use personal data for. So there are different processing purposes for which you might need consent, but then there are a lot of different purposes for which consent may not be the legitimate legal basis, right? In those cases, I think the first thing companies have to do is to understand where exactly would consent be the right legal basis. And most companies get this wrong because they look at the law as a requirement where you have to take consent for all processing activities, and that is not the case. And if you look at it from a compliance checkbox perspective, what companies would do is that they would make sure that you have a consent banner that pops up and you have a list of different purposes, and then you can choose which one to use or which one to select as a customer. But from a product or a business perspective, that is not helpful. You wouldn't want your consents to be shown on the first consent form a data principal or a customer sees. You would want it to be progressive. So the first thing to understand is how to make sure that your touch points for your customer have consent forms ingrained, and you do it at the time of collecting or before collecting personal data, instead of doing at a stage which is not even relevant for the customer in that particular context. A simple example, if for an e-commerce company, we would want to focus on collecting personal data for account registration first. If we have to do analytics, we would take that consent or seek that consent at a later stage. And for the data that we already have in our inventory,
Yeah. Yeah.
first thing we have to do is understand the purpose of processing. Why do we even have that data? Right? Most companies today also see a lot of friction when there is a requirement of deletion of data, because product analytics and different teams argue that this data might be useful in the future. So that is a narrative, that is the cultural shift we also have to slowly implement. As Anshu also mentioned, that it matures over time. We really have to see what kind of purposes we have data for and potentially assign a retention period for those set of data elements as well. If we think that this data is not needed, then before even sending a notice to a data principal, deletion or archival should be the first or primary step. Then maybe you shortlist based on that segregated users and then send a notice that this is how you send data to data principals and seek their consent for particular processes. So multiple different steps, each focused on making sure that there's relatively low effort in terms of conducting privacy compliances, but at the same time the strategy will change basis your industry, because from e-commerce to b2b your requirements would change.
Yeah. And I think Ashutosh, you shared some thoughts on the same topic of, we can call it legacy customer consent, retrospective consent, whatever the right. Everybody uses their own terms, but sort of what are your thoughts of either you've already handled it or thinking about handling it?
In terms of like say consent management, see, we have been handling it in a right manner where we give the option to the user to choose up like when they're coming onto the signing up, when they're signing in again, where they're putting the like the cart value they, at the checkout, we take those consent at the different places so that they have the relatability about, like, say, what kind of things are going to come up in terms of communication, and what is the utilization of that consent, why we are asking over that. And that makes the user more aware about, like, say, what's happening around, and what kind of communication I can expect from the brand, and do I have the control as well. And that kind of visibility we have given to the user into the section of their profile, so that they can choose up onto this part as well. They don't need to be dependent onto the support team to reach out. Okay, I need to, this changes to be done. So those kind of things are there in place as well for giving more control to the user.
Got it. Ashish, I'll come to you next. I think slightly different question. I think now if you think about all the different parts you need to do a privacy transformation, right? I think, of course, this focused a lot around consent and all of that. And I think Krishna talked about data discovery. But, if you have to operationalize this, I think we talked about DSAR requests coming in, deletion requests coming in, right? How do these all work together, right? Because technically, if you've got a updation request or a deletion request, it has to go and impact the multiple perhaps versions of that exist, right, in an organization. So how do these different parts work together? How do you sort of structure it so that they talk to each other?
Yeah, so my perspective on this note is like make a single plane of glass as per governance point of view. You must have a single dashboard which must cover the like consent management, right, and data subject rights, like right to access, right to modify, or right to delete. Along with that, breach notification you must have. You give the data uses, like what is the purpose limitation, and if being a user want to see revisit again ki what is the purpose, where you are leveraging this data. And most critical thing is like there are different privacy component, right? So data accuracy is very important. Why it is important? Like if you have a centralized database, right? But you are leveraging the CRM for customer management, like you are selling the package, right? It must be sync on real time. Otherwise, few organizations they have a practice key. They are a crown like job they had set, and a particular time frame after 24 hours it got synced. So within what is the of this 24 hour, like in this time period, of course user will get some misleading information, right? He revoked the consent but it was not updated and something got misused. So trust is very important to achieve the goal. And and security as well as key, yes, continuous, you must encrypt the sensitive information while data in transit or data at rest, right? It is very critical. So you must have a strong encryption mechanism, right? And something is coming or some like breach notification, you must implement this practice as well key to notify your customer as well. So by implementing these like milestone, you will achieve the good customer trust, right? So this is overall perspective for operation point of view, how to implement.
No, that is very helpful. I think let's go on to the last sort of part of our conversation, and I think we have a few audience questions also that we'll keep some time for. So let's maybe go back to a little bit of where we started, right? And I'm going to ask this question to both Krishna. Maybe you start, and Ashutosh, would love for you to add, right? So this notion of what is the ROI of a robust privacy posture, right? If hypothetically you had to calculate an ROI or put out an ROI, right? Where is that? What are the sources of value? How do you define what an ROI is? As you can imagine, building a privacy posture is seen as a cost today. Obviously, there's a cost of people and tooling and resources and building a team. On the other hand, of course, there is the question being asked, I'm sure, to some of you in general in the audience are saying, oh, what is the ROI? How do I see the ROI? How do I measure it? And I know we talked at the start a little bit about trust and loyalty and those sorts of things. But if I were to make it more tangible, how do you calculate ROI? So it would be great to get your thoughts, Krishna, to start with, and then Ashutosh, maybe yours as well, given you're kind of already embarked on this journey.
Absolutely. So, Malcolm, in terms of ROI, the first thing that a privacy professional should do is probably to look at the nature of the business that they are in. If they are in a B2C business, the parameters that they would look at while calculating an ROI would be different versus a B2B business, right? In a B2B business, the onus on the business is very much different. The obligations are different. The amount of effort they have to do is different because it would traditionally differ a lot from how B2C organizations also respond. Some parameters that you can use to create or calculate ROI is just look at the cost of automation of privacy, look at the cost of privacy consultants, probably look at the hiring that you would have to do to implement certain privacy requirements within your organization. If you're using a technology platform, look at the different storage costs associated with it, look at the cloud specific cost associated with it. So these are some parameters that you can see to identify how much cost would it take for you as an organization to implement privacy. Then once you understand the cost of implementation of privacy, look at the lost value or the lost realization. If you're unable to enter a new market because you don't have the data privacy requirements embedded in your organizational processes, then that is a potential revenue line that you're missing out on because you are not able or capable to comply with, let's say, a requirement such as GDPR. You can look at competitive differentiations between leaders in your business that are looking at privacy and trust as a value added benefit for their marketing activities as well as their product developments. Then you can compare it with how that has helped them from the moment that they have started implementing those requirements, started talking about it, the tone of their language has changed in their communications. So that is also a good way to understand how your competitors are either leveraging one of those concepts while you implement trust and privacy related concepts in your organization as well. So these are some starting points that you can definitely look at as to how does it really affect my organization, the context of my organization, and the amount of efforts, the time, energy, resources that I might have to either procure or either outsource to get an understanding of the cost of privacy compliance. Then you look at your lost realized value or revenue, which are across different geographies, and then you see that difference. Use that analysis, present it to your board, and it will help instead of just barging into that boardroom with a uh, announcement of regulatory fines and looking at competitors that have probably gone through a fine. Because let's face it, in India, that is still a long way to go. For a data protection board to come in and fine organizations, we still have a long journey. What you can use is the data that is available today.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Ashutosh, would you agree? What is your take if you have to? You've been down this program. If you have to now present ROI hypothetically to your board, as Krishna said, how would you quantify it? How would you present ROI?
See, for at Urbanic, we look at it in a three-layer kind of a perspective. Maybe like one is efficiency, second is compliance, and third is the customer trust, if I put it in the right manner. Because on the efficiency side, we quantify things like say reduce audit preparations, those time that you spend with a lot of checks, consent response time becomes faster, and more of automation that comes into the check for compliance reporting. So I would say like when we did all the checks and the things which we were supposed to do, we could centrally manage the consent management things and cut out like say manual data by around 50-60%. So that is like pure operational value that came up for us. For example, now the second thing is about the compliance terms. If I say it's became like it helps us to put up more tighter controls into the organization in terms of how the data is utilized with different folks which are there the part of the organization and how they are communicating to the customer. We had lesser escalation cycles, less work that we need to do, our team needs to do. And the main thing is about the trust ROI, which is the main part why we did that. It is like we treat customer satisfaction and retention as like a proxy metric for the privacy trust that is there. And when customer constantly like coming up, see the transparent data and instant control, it strengthens the loyalty about the brand and the platform that they are shopping on. So these are the things we actually keep on checking up, and we measure ROI not just as like say cost saved or the hour saved, but as a time saved plus the friction removed for the consumer and the trust that we got to see in the consumer when they come and give us more better retention onto the platform.
Got it. No, I think that's fantastic, right? Because you laid out these three buckets. I'm sure in each of the buckets, if you had to theoretically come up with a number, you could come up with a
Mm.
number and attribute real, like you said, either top line or bottom line sort of impact to this. No, that's great. I think I hope a lot of the listeners onto this sort of think of that framework. I think what I'll just add 30 seconds from our side. I think very similar, are probably very similar sort of framework as we see. There is a something about efficiencies, lower data footprints, lesser sort of audit costs, less duplication of data, less sort of basic storage, IT, data ops costs, right? I think there's a piece around risk writer controls, like you're kind of reducing your surface area both internally, externally with your third parties, right? And therefore, risk costs, what is usually in, let's say, financial institutions classified as ops risk costs or provisions go down. And then there's of course the value of title loyalty and repeat and those sorts of things, right? So I think we've been on this effort to actually put a real number, and this has been very helpful, and we'll keep this dialogue going. So maybe moving to the last part of this conversation, and I'll bring you back in, Anshu. I know would love to hear your thoughts. I think you've been now, and I'll obviously contrast that with Ashish, and I'm going to come to you next, Ashish. Is now obviously a transformation like this, as Krishna said, needs people, resources, budgets, but not just that, right? It needs attention of management. It needs people truly sort of participating in it. I'm sure there are organizations who say yes, we'll do tick box, which is I'm sure will happen, but I think you've done right. You need people's real participation. So how do you get that? How do you get uh, organization to move along, right? I mean, one is obviously to get the investments and the people and hiring, which is okay, but how do you really get organization moving along and fully buying into this and truly participating? What are the kind of things you've done, or what are the kinds of things that work?
I think first of all, one, it's not easy. Getting people to, because ultimately, see, all of this privacy and data protection, it's a cultural change. You have to change the mindset of people. And I've always told that we as Indians, we are far removed from the idea of privacy as such. See, we're not Europeans, we're not Germans, that we understand privacy by nature. I mean, I've always, in my trainings, in my discussions, I have always told that if you stand demonetization was happening, in that half an hour, 10 people in front of you and 10 people behind you would know what problems you have, how many children you have. So as Indians, it's not easy that people really appreciate and understand what really privacy is.
Unless you're
So
Gen Z, as Ashutosh was beginning to say. So anyways.
yeah, I think Gen Z, again, there are two categories. One are very wary of how the data is being utilized. Others, it has come naturally to them because they're born in this digital culture, so they feel that oh, it's okay. They don't probably realize it also that what's going to happen to the data. So there are two categories, we don't know. So but then for me, it has not been an easy journey, I would say. You have to use different ways with different stakeholders. It could be, with some stakeholders, it could be a simple conversation wherein you make them realize that why it is important. And I've always felt that, since it's not only from the business perspective, you have to make them realize, you have to make them realize from their own personal data which is being utilized by other companies, or how it is being misused by some of these leading companies of the world. That is when they truly start understanding, oh, it is important. Oh, we are also at the other side, not only from business perspective. So that is when I think, for a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, they start kind of working together, they start collaborating with you. For others, it could be simple. Oh, I've been asked to do this. It's a compliance requirement. No questions asked. I'll do it whatever you want me to do it. For others, it could be simple. Maybe sometimes going to their bosses also that it's not happening. We need to get this done. So जैसे हिंदी में कहते हैं साम दाम दंड भेद everything. So you have to, whatever works with every kind of stakeholder, you have to do your stakeholder mapping properly, and that is how you can get it moving. No one trick works for all in all organizations.
Ashish, you're probably on the other side, which is you're starting, right? Would you agree? Is that how you are also thinking about getting the organization along? How do you get people to buy in and move on this agenda?
Yeah, so I do agree with Hansu. Just because this is the overall game of mindset, and this is a cultural effect, right? So, of course, so there is a single solution. Yes, keep spreading the awareness training, do some tabletop exercise with top leadership. Actually, this is the approach of top driven, right? So, like we did tabletop exercise about privacy awareness. So they will implement the culture in their downlines, right? So maybe HR head, marketing head, and CTO under CTO teams, different teams are there. So once they will spread the message, so of course people will start practicing privacy practices, right? So of course it is a very crucial, but it would take time for maturity point of view, and continuous training, continuous learning, awareness, and different exercise need to perform for mature to achieve the maturity, right? And of course, what regular DPDP, of course, I think 2 year back, when fine category was declared, कि, uh, 150 crore, whatever per breach. Yeah. So, but this is the biggest thing. Like any company which have overall turnover is below than 250 crore, what they will do? They will not operate the business. Of course, you must follow the best security and privacy practices to save the information, especially for organization point of view. And there is a layered approach, right? So in terms of awareness, in terms of security, privacy by design, and implement the best practices, and continuous governance and monitoring, these are the steps which will help to achieve the milestone.
Got it. Got it. No, thank you. I think we'll now take audience questions. I'll pick three and sort of address it to few of you. So let's perhaps start with one of the ones that came earlier. And I think, as Anshu reminded us, we are in India, we're not in Europe. So we have people who deal in physical, who walk into a bank branch or a store, or perhaps maybe even don't know how to read and write, right? So how do you deal with consent for those folks, right, in physical form? And I know, Ashutosh, you talked a lot about online journeys, etc., but there's still a lot of our population, right, who wants to do it physically, who wants to visit a store, and so on and so forth. So maybe I want two perspectives. So Anshu, maybe I'll start with you. How do you sort of cater to that, right? How do you cater to the physical world, to the, let's say, semi-literate world, and that population?
Sure. In fact, I'll give you an example. I remember that, I had visited one of the embassies for my visa. And there, of course, everything is happening physically. There is no digital exchange of the data which is happening. And before even the conversation started with the visa counselor, there was, a privacy notice which was taped to the table on which we were sitting. And of course, because all these interviews and discussions are all recorded, so I was told that you have to read this notice and you have to say yes, no, and then only we'll be able to move ahead. And I think this was like a good way, wherein you are asked to read it when you're in a physical ecosystem you're dealing with. Similarly, I think, yeah, if you talk about semi-literate, literate, then the only way is that during that conversation you have to make aware to the person that okay, you have rights. These are the choices which you can exercise. These are different ways, and the forms should also be enabled in such a way. So I remember that as part of our a credit card loyalty program, we work with a lot of banks to provide the co-branded cards, wherein they go to some of their customers physically to get the form signed and everything. So we have embedded those controls within the forms. So when somebody, and it is in both the languages, to start with. So it is in Hindi, it is in English. Those who are comfortable with whatever language, they can read that. And then additionally, we also advised, the person who was getting the form filled up to actually talk about it. So those are some of the ways. And then, for example, for travel agents, because we get a lot of bookings from the travel agents, which is an indirect way of collection of the data. People would actually walk into the travel agent office, share their data, and then get the booking done. So then we have implemented again in 2-3 ways. We have asked them to display the privacy policy. Just like the visa counselor, you have to, somebody needs to read that policy and be okay with it. Second is that, even if that does not happen, as a second step, we ensure that when the itinerary gets sent to them, the privacy policy link is embedded into that itinerary, so that you have another opportunities to read the privacy policy and get aware, and be more aware of the data subject. So there are different ways on how you have to tackle in making aware that customer. So of course, sometimes it may be uh, leading to a good engagement, sometimes not, but you have to keep trying.
Got it. Krishna, anything you would like to add to that perspective?
Right. I think this was another discussion that came up in one of our implementations while we were looking at a retail store. Very particular to the question, individual also asked that how do you do it for retail stores that are primarily brick and mortar and do not have a large digital presence? From a DPDPA perspective, I think the term digital at the beginning of the act covers a lot of aspects around that. But at the same time, if that physical invoice or a form is digitized, then of course it falls under the purview of the law. So there would be some investments that you might potentially need in these areas in terms of maybe having a digital tablet that you can use to collect users' consent. The reason for that is because even if you implement these measures, you would typically see the customer agent or the individual there providing consent on behalf of an individual, right? Because the effort to educate someone on making them aware about their rights, their choices is much more than me as a customer agent just going and clicking on consent on the principal's behalf. So a lot of training to internal individuals within the team as to what they exactly need to do when they collect consent from a customer has to be imparted. And at the same time, it has to be a very rigorous process to make sure that this particular process is also being followed. Because once when we did this implementation for a retail store in a region, we noticed that most customer agents wanted to just avoid the effort of educating people and making them aware about their rights and privacy choices. So what they did was they gave or they sort of nominated themselves without the data principal's consent to give consent on their behalf. Of course, in the end, the company pays for fines that typically arise out of the situation, but much more training at a level where individuals who interact with customers, those particular segment have to be trained and enabled so that they can manage this piece well.
Got it. I think, like I said, we'll take two more, and we'll wrap up. So, Ashutosh, I'll address this to you. So, if you are somebody who's just starting, or perhaps a smaller enterprise, what would you advise to them on sort of what do they need to do to get going?
You mean like say offline? Or like
No,
say
no,
what
specifically
online?
on broader sort of on the broader privacy transformation in general, right? So, if I'm somebody starting today, what would you advise, especially if you're a small and medium enterprise? What do you need to sort of get done in the first few months, let's say? Where do I
So,
start?
so I would say like that when a small or medium enterprise like say started already, either they have existing platforms on which they come online, like say Shopify, all those existing platforms are there, and those platforms already have integrated solution into themselves where the consent management can be put up. That is the very primary things that can be there on checkout, on login. The privacy policies are in place so that the user is aware about like what the kind of choices they are making and who to reach out if they have some questions that are coming up. This is the second thing. Third thing, about giving them more control onto their communication preferences into the profile section and the user choice section, where the setting into the app setting page into the platform only. So these are the primary, I would say, three things one should have when they're starting up, and these things are readily available either within the platform that they're going online with, or they can have extensions or the I would say third party tools connected to the platform, because it's not like in the last 2 3 years. I think it has become more available as compared to what it was 4 5 years back because of the awareness. As I said, it is more.
Got it. And maybe we'll pick one final questions before we wrap up, and maybe Ashish, I'll sort of address it to you. Um, you know, from a and it's a slightly different version of this question, right? So from a very practical perspective, if I have, let's say, the first 90 days of getting this going, I know people are sort of waiting. Some people are started, some people are waiting. Um, what would you be advice to them? What do you need to sort of do in the first 90 days to start on this journey?
So, yeah, so starting this journey, it is very important to just set up the governance process, like create a single plane of glass and identify the different privacy modules like yeah, consent management, your like journey of your data subject rights, breach notification. So just set up these things, and most important thing is to perform the identification of data. So create the department wise data flow diagram, how they are data processing, perform DPIA, right, in terms of security, and do the sensitive PII information, uh, create the inventory of that information, right? The organization which is processing. So these are the critical measures. So to initially set up for initial 90 days, and later on, in later stage, of course, awareness is very important. So to complete to kick off in initial 90 days. And yeah, data discovery is very critical. So a lot of some AI driven tools are there for data discovery in market, and just do the uh, uh, do the discussion with department heads ki what data you are processing, and review this. Don't rely 100% on the whatever the tool identified data, and getting assured on that. So
Okay.
this is the overall.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. I think we are at the top of our time, and I think, like I said, the objective of today's conversation was to establish whether privacy and data governance transformation has value beyond compliance. I hope we've managed to get that conversation further along, and hopefully convinced most of you that indeed is. That was the idea. I think we also explored a little bit of where do you start and some of the challenges. So I know there are questions that are not fully answered, and we will get to them and get back to you. But I think we'll wrap up at this point. I wanted to say thank you to all the panelists for sharing thoughts candidly and transparently. I think some very useful ideas for the entire audience. And like I said, thanks again, and for whatever we couldn't answer, we'll get back. But appreciate everyone's time, and thank you again to everyone and all the panelists here. If anybody wants to share any closing thoughts, please feel free to.
Yeah, so I think, Malcolm, it was great to be part of the discussion today. And it was, I think, a very engaging discussion and around privacy, or how one's privacy is like getting evolved in terms of the compliance requirement. And it is something which is very a core business enabler these days, which is driving trust and agility towards the business perspective. And in terms of the DPDP era, the kind of user experience which is coming up. And thank you all guys like to be there in the call, and thanks Krishna, Varsha, and to organize such a session. And it was great to chat with all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ashutosh. Thank you,
Thank you
Anshu.
all. Thank you so much.
Thanks
You
guys. Bye
all.
bye.
Bye. Thank you.